Hi everyone, this is Catching Up with the Nerds with your hosts Tom and JC and our special guest David. This is a podcast about two dads that are catching up on all the nerdy stuff we miss, sharing how we pass on our nerdy passions to our kids, and deep diving into nerd pop culture to make it more accessible for you listeners. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, how's everyone doing?
All right.
Good. Sun is out.
Sun is out.
Yeah. Same here. Like days getting longer, so nice.
Beautiful.
I know.
So should we do
soon. Yep.
quick intros? David, you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is David Stago. I am a podcast producer and host. I host my own podcast called the Grit and Grind Basketball Podcast, which is available every week. I'm also a big fan of nerd culture, including a little bit of comic books, a little bit of anime, but mostly gaming. Big gamer over here. I think that's all.
You're in the right place. You've knocked at the right door. All right, that's my turn, I guess. Hey everyone, my name's Tom. I'm the other half of the Catching Up with the Nerd podcast. Doesn't mean that myself and JC are married. That means that we worked together. See that's the office for those who are watching. What do I like? Oh no, wait, I forgot my wife. Like when you go shopping and you forget your wife and your kids in the other aisle. It's the same thing. Anyway, married to a lovely woman named Ellie. We've been together for 20 years very soon. 20 years, can you imagine? Together we've got two kids, one who is 4, a boy obviously named Louis, who is now positively absolutely mad and is going back to school tomorrow, so that's great. Thank you everyone. And the other one whose name Emily, and she's now 11 and a half, and she likes video games just like me. What else am I into? I don't know, comics, a little bit of anime, but mainly video games. All consoles, new consoles, everything you can throw at me that can be played on a screen, I play it. And I think that's it.
And I am Juan Garay. Everybody calls me JC. I'm the other half of the podcast. I am a podcaster, which is the first time I've said that, and it feels weird. But
feels dirty, like saying you're a YouTuber. Ooh.
I know. And I'm here to hand Tom a shovel when he digs himself into those holes, with his wife in particular. Ellie, hope you're not listening. So I also have a wife. Her name is Fiorella, and we've been married for 17 years. I've got 2 kiddos that are 11 and 5, Aiden and Arabelle. And I love my graphic novels, a good nerdy novel. I love everything that's nerdy in shows and movies, and I occasionally dabble in the video game world as well. So welcome back everyone to Catching Up with the Nerds.
Excellent.
What are we talking about today, Tom? What do inquiring minds want to know?
Yes. So we did part 1 and part 2 of our Black History Month recommendations. We are going back into it with a part 3 because I thought we should do a little bit more, add more content to our first 2 parts. So that's what we're here for and with today. Dave, there's going to be walking us through some more recommendations, anything to do with movies, video games, comics, anime, manga. I think that's pretty much it to sum it up. Shall we get through it?
Jump in.
Let's jump in, yes. All right. Dave, you wanted to start, or we told you to start? I don't know. Just what you frame it.
Yeah. No, I did want to start. And just to build off your intro, representation is important because that's how children and even adults can see themselves in the things that they watch, things that they listen to, and things that they're interested in. And it's important to sort of give all types of people that kind of inspiration to know that they can do something because they've seen someone that looks like them do something. So I just wanted to highlight just a myriad of different Black creators and shows and books and things like that that represent a range of different types of Black people, all interested in nerd culture, whether that's from an Afrofuturism perspective, from a sci-fi perspective, or even just cartoons and things like that. So I wanted to highlight a show that I do not watch personally, but has a ton of Black representation, a TV show called Star Trek Discovery. Everyone knows Star Trek. It's a huge brand. It's had a number of films, a number of TV shows, a number of different iterations and spin-offs and spin-offs of spin-offs and all kinds of things. But I wanted to highlight this first because I think one of the earlier influences in Black nerd culture was I've got her name here, Nikail Nicoles, who played Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, the original Star Trek, back in the, what was that, 70s and 80s? I think 70s into the 80s. And she actually has told the story of her appearing on the show, and actually she was cast and then didn't want to actually do it. She wanted to back out of it because she was becoming the first to do it. And she felt uncomfortable being the first person to do it. But she was encouraged by someone because that's why it was important for her to do it, right? She wasn't just someone on the ship. She wasn't in the background. She was the lieutenant on the ship, and it was really important for her to take on that role. And then obviously through the years, there's been a number of Black people in the Star Trek universe. And we've come now to Star Trek Discovery, which is the most recent iteration of the show. And there's a number of Black people led by Sonequa Martin Green, who plays Michael Burnham, Oyin Oladeo, Ronnie Rowe, and David Ajala are all on the show. So it's a very, very diverse cast. It's a predominantly Black cast, I believe, in terms of who's on the ship. And I think part of that is because it's directed by Olatunde Osunsami, who was actually given the opportunity just to do some Star Trek shorts originally, I think, before being given the gig of having this show to direct. And yeah, it's meant that there is this big influx of Black faces on a spaceship or in a spaceship, which you don't often get to see.
It's funny you mentioned Star Trek first, because I was watching a bit of doing a bit of research into this episode, and I was looking at I can't remember the things. I can't remember which Star Trek it is. I don't think it's the original one or Next Generation or Voyager, maybe. I think it was in Voyager. Star Trek Voyager. So they were interviewing the one of, I think, the only Black character in it. I'm trying to find his name whilst I'm talking to you. And his point was about how culturally it's a lot harder. I don't think it is now anymore, or maybe it's less prominent nowadays, but it's a lot harder for Black kids and Black adults to actually admit that they are nerdy or they enjoy nerdy content. I thought that was quite interesting. So he also got the role on Voyager. I'm trying to find out who I'm talking about.
I've seen his face. I'm just
like very, very skinny, tall guy. I can't remember his name. And he said like he took a while before he actually accepted to go on show, because he was himself, like he's himself a nerd. Like he loves everything to do with space movies and sci-fi and stuff like that.
That's LeVar Burton. Right?
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, that's Next Generation. He plays Geordi.
No, I'm not. It's not the one I'm talking about.
It's not that. Oh, right.
It's another guy.
Because then there was another one. Someone else cast as a Klingon. That was African American descent, and I think that may be the one you're talking about. I think that's him.
I'm just trying to find his. Whilst I'm talking to him, I'm trying to find his face on Wikipedia right now.
This is super weird, and I think we should talk about this live on air, because in all of the images, he's in it. But whenever you go to the cast list, he's not in the first 12 characters.
So I'm talking about Team Russ. That's the guy I'm talking about. If you look him up, he's on the cast list in Wikipedia. So there's an interview of him. You can find it on YouTube and everywhere.
Okay, there he is. Tuvok. Yeah.
And he was saying is that it's quite interesting that he also had issues with not admitting, but saying that he was going to be part of Star Trek, the Star Trek crew and casts,
Yep.
because he was like, well, from the like when he grew up, like people wear, you know, like JC was saying, it's like closet nerds. You know, it's like, yeah. And so it's quite interesting that, and he got his role was pretty big on the series, like a bit like you were mentioning before. It's like you don't want to have that second role type of minor role. That's the word I'm looking for. If you're gonna be part of it, you just want to be in it. Oh my god, he was in iCarly. I'm just reading his stuff. Don't ask me why I know that. So it's quite interesting, and the whole mentality behind it, I thought, was quite interesting to sort of not be ashamed about it, but it's almost like, I'm going into this role, but I don't really want people to know about it, or they'll find out without me having to tell them.
And that's another side of why it's important to have that representation, right? Because characters in those roles can normalize Black nerd culture, right? It makes it okay for there to be Black nerds, and it's not something that there's minor in the Black community. For example, so before we started recording, I shared a video with you guys on YouTube, and when you watch it, you'll see it. I think he points out that I think among teenagers in the US, like 70% of white teenagers are playing video games, but in the Black community, it's actually 89%. So it's far more prominent than you would think it is to be nerdy. I don't know, playing video games, I don't know if that makes you a nerd in that description, but it's only you're getting towards that description. So it's quite interesting. Maybe it's something that culturally is a big. I think that is largely because, and I'm just speaking off the dome here, I haven't done any research, but I would think that is largely because it is a lot cheaper to get your child a console and a couple of games for them to play for a while than it is for you to take them out on holiday and to take them rowing and doing all of these more expensive activities that you just are less likely to afford in your situation. And then I think because over the years, I mean, things are definitely changing, but over the years, as Black people have become more and more able to earn money, the culture hasn't necessarily shifted away from not doing things like archery and shooting and like all of these expensive country club activities that are typically considered white activities.
Horse riding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's good you started with Star Trek Discovery. I think it's a good starting point there. I'm not massive, never been into Star Trek, so I think that apart from the original one, don't know, I was always more into Star Wars in a way. But
if you think about it, like when you brought up Uhura with Star Trek, right? That was 1966. At the same time, we're coming off cartoons like the Jetsons. And one of the big criticisms of the Jetsons is like it portrays a future in which there are no Black people. There are only white people, and even like the robot sounds like super, super, super white, and it's kind of shocking, right? There's like you never think of it as that has meaning, but the fact that portraying a future without diversity does have an impact. It really does, because it's like when we talk about future, a lot of times places like Jetsons, we talk about a utopia where things are better. And if things are better and they don't include color, that can't be good, right? And I think that's where it's a nice tie into like the Uhura comment, because she was also very hesitant because of her role in Star Trek, because while she was regularly on camera in the set, at the end of the day, she was doing a lot of connecting calls. Like that was in the early episodes, that was it. And that's some of the things that really turned her off as well. Because to your point as well, she didn't want to carry the mantle of being that first person, but also it's like the role didn't feel substantial. And Martin Luther King actually called her. And he was one of the ones that actually said, like, you need to do this because to your point, Dave, it was like the representation matters. Even if the role isn't what we want it to be, at least we're portrayed somehow. And she stuck with it because of that. Yeah. It wasn't like a role where it was like one of the people that goes down to like Mars or whatever with Captain Kirk and is wearing a red shirt, and now they're gonna get killed. It's like it wasn't that role. Like, she was ongoing cast for the foreseeable future, and it still meant something, even though it was underwritten. And then eventually you see like every Star Trek show, you see how representation gradually steps up. Like if you go on to like Geordi afterwards and Next Frontier, you can see that character has a much bigger role than Uhura ever had. And you keep graduating until you end up with the current version of Star Trek. And to the point where it's like, all right, no, that is what a future should look like. It should be diverse and represented in all ways. So I think Star Trek did a lot given its timing, where it didn't need to do that at that time. It began to take steps into representation.
Yeah, you have to think also the space race that was going on between the US and Russia. It's like at the time, both countries were predominantly white, and like all the faces you'll see on the news with, well, either with the moon landing or just going into space, the vast majority of people involved were white. So having somebody who is black in space, I think is also something that is like, it's not something you would picture, because it's not something that as a the setup of it that you've been used to watch on the news or whatever source of information you would get is like, well, look, it's a bunch of white people going to space. It's like, well, suddenly you got somebody with dark skin in space, and you'll be like, huh, this, and it might be weird what I said. Like, what I'm saying is that I remember growing up and watching again the old Star Trek, the original ones, and being a kid, I think I sort of remember the first time I saw her on screen. I was like, huh, there's a black lady in the show. Like, Captain Kirk is white, everybody else is white. Yeah, and it sort of stood out to me, and it was definitely one of those moments that I still remember to this day, and it's quite. And the fact that this jumped out to me is a reminder why representation is important, because why should it jump out to me? It shouldn't. It should be a normal thing. It should be like, oh, another character. But no, and I clearly remember that. It's again, very interesting.
Yeah, and you have to start somewhere, and it's funny you bring up the like NASA and the Russian space station operations and all of that, because we had the film Hidden Figures last decade, where they actually highlighted that there were black people involved. It's just that they were never brought to the forefront. Their stories weren't told, and I think this is a big part of the issue. It's that there has been black people involved in all of these things at every turn. It's just that they're never given the spotlight. They're never given. Their stories are never told. They're never put front and center. So it's only once they're put front and center that we can then also shine a light on the people behind the scenes that have made these things happen. And hopefully we do some of that in this episode.
It's I was sort of equate it with like if you want to go back, it's a completely different topic, but going back to the like World War I and II, the World War efforts, and it's like not only recently, but like the last 20-30 years, when it's been talked about the role of women behind the recovery effort and all that stuff. It's like if women didn't pull together to make sure that all the husbands and everybody was shipped out to fight those wars, but then it's like, well, they never portrayed in the movies. Like, they just like you remember like old war movies would be like, stay at home, look after the kids, but like, damn man, they actually they were building weapons back at home doing their parts also. So it's the same sort of thing. It was like, well, it's not as interesting as guys shooting guns and exploding buildings and stuff like that. So it's the conveniency of it is like, well, we don't really want to know about it, but then actually those stories also matter, because without one you don't have the other.
And you bring that up, we don't need to harp on about it for too long, but it was a world war. Like, people seem to forget that it was a world war. Like, a lot of especially French troops and people involved in the French army were from the
Africa.
countries that they colonized in Africa, and the same was true of the British army, the countries that were colonized there. And it's funny because you don't think about the significance of those things if you know about them already. And being the age that I am, 33, I didn't bat an eyelid when I knew about Lieutenant Uhura, because Star Trek Next Generation was out, and then Voyager followed it, and then the next one came, and each one always had some pretty strong Black characters in them. And I never really thought that my dad was watching these shows because of that, but I think that was a large part of why he found them interesting. He also happens to be someone who fought in the Second World War. So I've always known that Black people, people from Ghana, people from the Gambia, were heavily involved in World War II. As I grew up, I learned the significance of India's efforts. Like, Britain couldn't have done anything they did without the support and help they got from India. And all of that was completely pushed to the back and almost hidden by the stories that get told when you're learning about it in history.
Like the Tuskegee Airmen, right? We're only seeing those stories come up very recently, but that's like one of the most efficient flying crews in the U.S. Air Force during World War II were the Tuskegee Airmen, and they kept sending them to missions that were clearly missions they should not have come out of, and yet they did. They kept coming back. And that's just kind of tip of the iceberg. There's so many other stories lying below that we just don't get to see because it's not the white savior story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what makes a difference. So swinging it back to like Star Trek, that's one of the things that I also find very interesting is that it's a loved piece of IP. What I mean is like it's something that people are super nerdy about, and it already has been established as it's this, right? And if you compare that to like the Spider-Man like change to Miles Morales, and the I mean, just horrible comments that came off the back of that. It's actually, and I don't know, maybe Star Trek fans haven't embraced it as much as I want to think they have, but I feel like in that world, like diversity has been embraced a lot more than with other IP, because we had the Star Wars controversy for damn sure. And we're seeing it in Marvel and so forth. And I just feel like they got started earlier, and hence the transition to get to a place where we get Star Trek Discovery has been more seamless rather than controversial.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's possible. It would make sense. That's the case. It would make sense.
Yeah. Cool.
Right.
On to the next one.
Do you want to carry on, Dave, or should I go with one of mine, or what do you want to do?
Let me see what else I've got for TV. Is that all I've got? That was the big one I wanted to do for TV. I don't know if you want to go off.
Well,
area.
I can pivot to my favorite topic, which is video games. I think that the way I approached it, I wanted to see if there were any good games with strong Black leads in it. And I think like the first one that came to me was like the most recent example, which was, and we mentioned it before, JC Miles Morales, which is like, well, okay, that's a bit of an obvious one. Granted, it's a great game, and again, it's got a dual representation in it, because obviously his father being Black and the mom being from Puerto Rico, right? Is it Puerto Rico? I was confused. Yeah, Puerto Rican. So that's got that dual thing. That is actually quite talking to my kids, because but obviously Ellie being Spanish, it's like they also have the dual sort of citizenship, if you will, and it's quite interesting when they see the mom speaking Spanish in either the TV series or in the game when I'm playing it. It's like, oh look, it's like us, sort of vibe. So they can identify to that one in a way. But yeah, so that was the first big one. But then I went into a few other examples. So my list of recommendations / games, some of them are the main characters, some of them are just I thought they have a good ensemble of Black characters. I think that the one I want to talk about now is Jam Vendetta, which was like a quite interesting mix. and you know, got all the main rappers from the 90s and early 2000, you know, like Ludacris and I think Wu-Tang was in there. Was it when they? Can't remember if they were.
Redman definitely was. I'm not sure if. Yeah, I don't think the whole Wu-Tang clan was signed to Def Jam. I'm not sure.
Wait. Stop.
God.
I don't know what Def Jam Vendetta is, and now I'm fascinated. What is this?
God, you missed out.
Actually, that's true. That's very true, JC. I forgot. I should have
Is
mentioned
it
what
like
it is.
Mortal Kombat with like?
No. So it's a wrestling. It's a pro wrestling game.
Yes,
and I think it was using the same engine than the wrestling games. No
Mercy, and
No
which
Mercy.
one was before it? WrestleMania 2000.
Yes,
I remember
WrestleMania
that one,
2000.
Yeah.
So it got released on PS2 and GameCube. So it would have been early 2000.
Yeah.
Let me look that up. 2003 is when it came out.
Yeah.
There you go. Here's the list. Got a few names. DMX, Method Man, Redman, Ludacris, Capone, Scarface, Ghostface Killer, Joe Budden. God. Christina Milian.
Yeah, she was a manager or something like. She was part of the story.
She's in the story. Angel. Yeah, she's in the story. And then there's a bunch of fighters in there also. But so it was quite interesting. So it's one of the first games that because I'm not massively into wrestling, but that one got me into enjoying the sports, and the fight scenes were quite funny. You know, they had little sentences they will shout at their opponent. I think that was quite cool. But yeah, it's interesting. But again, if I'll try to put a description in or link to the video I'm referring to now. But the video I watched, which was the history of Black video game characters, I'll put the link in the description somewhere. The guy is really showing the evolution of how Black characters were represented in video games, which was like, well, okay, sports game, boom, basketball, like us. It's like, well, there you go. There was usually in the basketball game or in the boxing game, or they would be in a fighting game, and that's what Jam Vendetta is in there. And it took a while before that sort of representation, that sort of way of showing how a Black dude would be in a video game. They can be something else than just this big, muscly dude with a deep voice who would be like 3 feet higher than you are. You know, just be there, you know, like Gears of War. There's a bunch of there's a couple of Black characters in there if you guys have played that on the Xbox. And it's just a shooting game. And it's like literally the guys, like this one main character, like one big character who's Black is there. Is like he's twice the size of the main characters, like in height and in terms of muscles, and he's just in there just to break down walls, literally, and mess shit up, you know. So it's quite interesting. Like his talking parts are pretty basic, and you're like, okay, cool. But now there's an evolution towards characters that are a bit more, that, you know, that have more meaning, that are more meaningful, that have deeper more interesting things to say. So that's taking me to the next one, which is Lee Everett from The Walking Dead season 1, which is a Telltale game series. I don't know if you guys ever played that.
I'm familiar with it. I haven't played it.
So Telltale is like it's I'll call it a how can you say that? It's a video game series. So it's broken up in seasons, and those seasons are broken down in episodes. So it's the same. It's like watching a series, but with a nice graphic style.
Right.
And I think the company is dead now, but they don't make those games. So they had a deep.
It's been resurrected. Yeah,
it's been resurrected.
Someone bought them. It was a really complicated situation, basically, because they let the licenses on their games expire, so they couldn't actually make any more Walking Dead games or any more Batman games. They tended to stick to licenses, but it's been resurrected.
They had a lot of licenses around. They did a lot of.
It's an expensive game using licenses.
So what you do is you would purchase an episode, or part of the game, and you go through it, and obviously it's like watching an episode of Walking Dead, and you're presented with a bunch of different scenarios, and then depending on the answers you provide, the option you go for, you progress in different directions towards a story. Sort of, well, that's the idea behind it, but usually you get to the same end and everybody else, you take a different route, but you get there. Anyway, so the main character of season 1 is Lee Everett, who is this black guy that has to do what everyone else does in Walking Dead, which is getting from A to B, trying to get killed by a zombie. And I think he's got what's the name of the actress? Like, he's looking after this child. I think it's either Clementine, I think that's her name. And who is also, I think she's mixed race, or the way, at least the way she's portrayed in it. So she's adopted by him. So that was, I think, to me, the first main character that was black that I could see was like, wow, for once, it's not this either the athletic dude type, it's not a sportsman. He's not a guy that's going to be there and just shooting guns, for example. It's got a different aspect to the guy, which now leads me to another guy who's sort of using his brains and techniques from the game Watchdogs 2, Marcus Holloway. So I think you've played that one, I think, Dave, if I remember. Didn't we talk about Watchdogs 2?
No, I haven't played that one. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I haven't played that one, no. I had the first one, and I was very close to getting the third one. But no, that one I didn't get around to playing.
Third one's cool. But Walking Dog, Walking Dog, bloody hell. Watchdogs, Walking Dog. It's confusing to me. In Watchdogs, it's I think I can't remember. The second one is also set in the future or in the present. I think the third one is in the future.
It's near future, very near future. It's San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're trying to join. So Marcus is trying to join this group of hackers who are there to disrupt either the government. I can't remember the scenario in number 2. It's not really. I've not finished it. That's why I've played through it, but I'm not completed it. It's on my list of things to finish again. But again, it's showing you another aspect, which is a black nerd dude, and he's got a brain. That's his main. He's got the physicality to him, because in all Watchdog films, you got to run around and get yourself through tiny places, also climb a couple buildings and get to inside a building. So it requires physicality, but his main attribute is his brain, his skills. And also, I thought that was pretty cool. That it's like, he's this guy who's like, he's super cool. His character is very well done, but he's got a brain. That's how he's going to get places. That's how he's going to take down the government or whatever he's chasing these days. And I think that's a great evolution to see that. Trying to think what else he does in there, but yeah, if that's the sort of character you want to see, that's a great game to get into. Watch Dogs 2, it's great. So I'm going to my list. I'm reading at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, with that, that's one of my favorite types of genre. Like, I love games where you can hack things and play stealthily, and solve whatever the issue is without ever hurting anyone or attacking anyone. Like, I love stuff like that, and the Watch Dogs games are a really good example of doing that. And in making it wasn't just the fact that it was a black protagonist. The first Watch Dogs game had a lot of backlash because the main character people felt was a bit of a wet blanket.
Yes.
Like, they didn't want to root for him. He seemed kind of one-dimensional. It's basically a revenge storyline.
His family dies or something. Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, you go through and people just didn't feel like the character was very likable. So what they actually did with the second game was they chose Ryan Holloway, who's like a charismatic young black man, who ends up joining a crew of hackers who are also all young. So the story in Watch Dogs 2 is actually much more upbeat and much more fun and a bit more whimsical. But I think with that, what they tried to do was just make the characters a bit more likable. Some people didn't like the change to sort of like common culture, millennial culture, with like certain catchphrases and things like that. But it was an active attempt to be a bit cooler, a bit younger, and a bit more relatable with the characters. And it's very interesting that they would both tie being more relatable and more cool to a black protagonist.
Yeah.
The cool thing, we know, the black people are cool thing, that's been a trope since the since the 60s and 70s. But the fact that they wanted a more relatable character and went with a character who is black is a huge step forward, not just for video games, but for media in general.
Yeah.
So then Watchdogs, so you mentioned it's like, what's the purpose of the game then? Like, what are you trying to accomplish in it?
There's always, I can never remember the exact names. I know there's an organization called DedSec.
DedSec, yeah.
And then there's another is DedSec are the good guys? They're the good guys?
It's, I think never, it's supposed to be they're supposed to be the good guys, but it's always very
but basically the government has started to use surveillance and things like that to help control society and the way society works.
Right.
So you come in as hackers to sort of disrupt the sort of big brother that the government has become. And normally there'll be another protagonist who's doing some other foul stuff using the surveillance to keep a lid on it and keep it in the dark, basically. And you're trying to bring it to the light as hackers. So you go and infiltrate places and find out information to help show the people what this organization is using the government's surveillance systems to do.
So the in Watch Dogs 3, which I've started playing also, they've moved the action from San Francisco to London, and then if you want to talk about representation in that game, that you can't be more representative than that, because it literally to go quickly through the plot, it's I think the end of Watch Dogs 2, something happened, DedSec gets sort of dismantled, or it's the beginning of the end of DedSec, and then operations move to London, where a bunch of terrorist attack happen, and the government gets they give full power to a private company to be given access to all of the database for every single person in the UK. So that means they can spy on everyone, and so obviously it plays a lot on a bunch of people saying, yeah, that's awesome, we'll be safe, but then there's a bunch of people that are like, yeah, too much, invading too much of my privacy. But there's no more DedSec, so there's only a bunch of people around that are like even more underground, and your main character is trying to join them, but then also part of you trying to join the new DedSec, you're asked to recruit more people. So that's what we're saying about representation, is literally you can recruit anyone you want that's walking on the street. They can be that 75-year-old grandmother is there, it can be a bunch of kids, and they all have the different attributes, and they can all bring a different way of playing the game. So when I started playing, I was with this Indian guy that was trying to get revenge on the government because he got laid off and the job. So there's a lot of stuff like that. So this one is quite interesting. There's a different take on. It's not just that one character you're using, but it's pretty much anyone. So if you want to do an army of of whoever you want to be joining, it's this one is really great in terms of people you're bringing in and who you can play with. So it's quite interesting. But again, Watchdog is Watchdog. There's got a lot of criticism from a lot of people, like probably not the best game ever, but it's a great game. It's fun. I think you like if you like hacking games and stuff like that, it's you can do whatever you want. You can completely disregard the plot and go around the city and just hack people,
just move cars and all sorts of nonsense. Yeah.
Oh, really? Is it a little bit like playing like you're Mr. Robot?
Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of comparison between the two.
So,
I'd be into that.
Define the same thing. Yeah.
I love that show so much. Okay, cool.
You've got a PS4, right? No, I can't remember.
PS4.
Yeah, so you can get yourself Watchdog 1 and 2 on there. Actually, no, 3. Even 3.
They're all there.
Yeah. And they like 1 and 2 will be quite inexpensive. Even the third one, they're trying to move units so that you'll be able to get it for quite cheap. these days.
For all the parents out there, what kid level would this kind of fall into? Obviously adult level, but
I think it's roughly a 15. I think
yeah,
language and violence.
it's
okay.
more
It has guns in it.
I mean, compared to like a Grand Theft Auto, for example, is it several levels below that, or just slightly?
It's definitely lower in tone, but there's access to guns, so it's in terms of violence. There's no prostitution or anything like that, like there is in GTA.
I think GTA is also, there's a lot of second, third degree humor in there. You have to be experienced in life to understand what they're referring to. So it's not really, there's none of that in Watchdogs. I think there's it's not the same sort of humor. Pivoting into GTA 5 actually, which was one of my favorite game of all time because of YOLO. I just wanted I think I finished with that and a couple of mentions, but Franklin Clinton, who is the 33% of the 1/3 of the characters you can play in that game. Actually, he starts. So GTA 5 again. I don't know if we need to introduce that game. It's quite the GTA series. It's quite big. It's highly. What's the word we should use? Highly controversial series of video games. Actually, it came back in the news in the States at the moment. One of your
again. What do they do now?
Apparently, in Chicago, there's an uptake in carjacking. And so one of your senators is like, oh, we need to ban GTA 5 because apparently that's the reason why people are carjacking people.
10 years ago.
Yep. Oh my God, we're still having that conversation. Wow.
But that could be a subject for another podcast.
Oh God, yeah.
Anyway, so Franklin Clinton, he's your, again, being GTA, is your typical gang member who is trying to get out of it. And he starts off as this really not dodgy, it's not the word I want to use, like, well, he's just a gang member and you're like, not really sympathetic towards him, but then the more you play, the more he's trying to get out of it and trying to get, he's trying to make his money and get out of that life. And I think he's one of the coolest characters I've ever played, to be honest. Like you can pick and choose when you want to go back to every single character. So at any moment you can just give up on your character. Even if you're in the middle of a mission, you can go, hey, I've had enough of Franklin. I'm just going to go back to Michael, the other guy. I spent most of my time playing Franklin, to be honest. I thought he was quite. I preferred his story talk to me. I don't know, like the other dude who's completely deranged. I can't remember his name. The third character. I'm like, can't really relate to that. And then the other guy, Michael, who's like this rich guy who's retired that was supposed to be dead, or faked his own death. Also, I'm like, I can't really relate to that, but for some reason, Franklin, the way he was,
So on a general point, though, like for example, like having a black character being a protagonist in GTA 5, it's kind of like showing up in a Star Wars movie, right? It's like Grand Theft Auto is just one of the most played games in the world.
Yeah.
Do we consider this representation to be a positive representation to move things forward for basically black characters within video games?
I find that to be an interesting question. I also find it interesting that Tom started with GTA 5 and didn't make reference to GTA
San Andreas.
3. Yeah.
Because GTA 3. It's within
GTA
that
San Andreas. It's not called
San Andreas. Yeah. It's within that time period when I wasn't. I sort of dipped out of video game a little bit, and I believe, there was one period like the PlayStation 2 era.
The dark ages.
The dark ages. It's not really where I had other interests at the time, so I wasn't really playing.
What? You had a life? What? No, Tom, come back from the edge, buddy.
It's crazy times. But I agree that it's not really where I started with the GTA series. I started like the first one I played was on PS1, with the top-down view.
Yeah.
That was absolutely mad. But like GTA San Andreas is one that I skipped not by design. It just happened. Yeah.
Okay. And GTA San Andreas was a massive deal at my school amongst the black kids in my in my year, or up and down the whole school really, because that in that game, the protagonist was black, the the enemies were black, the whole neighborhood was black. There was very few actual white characters in the entire game, and it was good in the sense that it borrowed from hip hop culture and black culture and things like that. And as much as it represented a lot of the negative sides of those things, it was good to sort of see that side of, I don't know, it's weird. I want to say that side of crime almost. Like you go through history, right? And there's a lot of notorious people. Like if we're talking about Chicago, there's like Al Capone and you go through and there's like, you look at the film The Godfather, for example, right? And it shows the familial, it shows the human aspects of really shady crime families in Italy and in America. You then have The Sopranos, right? Again, a really excellent piece of media, well told stories that humanize people who are ultimately criminals and bad people, and we shouldn't be relating to them in any way. In some sense, GTA San Andreas did that for a generation of black people in throughout the world because of how popular it was.
I think that was explained again in the video, which I'll put a link to. That referring, the way he explained it was that because San Andreas and Def Jam Vendetta they came out around the same period, as like 2003, 2004, right?
Yeah.
What you referred to before with black characters is just like it's a face that you've got on the screen, right? Or it's just another character. What you've got in those two games in particular is it's a culture that is now being introduced
and represented.
So in Vendetta, it's the hip hop culture that goes in there. In San Andreas, we've got black characters, black culture within the world of violence, drugs, gang banging, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
hip hop. But then also the stories. I never really played it. I don't know. I think if he turns it around, or if he's what's his.
Yeah, I'm not sure in that sense because I didn't have a PlayStation at the time. But the other side that I'm glad was portrayed in that is the humor.
Yeah,
because
and also that
black humor is different to other types of humor. I mean, all cultures have their own types of humor, but like GTA is a series that once they went 3D was kind of known for being quite funny, as much as it's got all of this violence and stuff like that. They always have jokes and stuff in the stories. GTA 4 to a lesser extent outside of the DLC, which is wacky. But that was something that people complained about, that the story wasn't very funny. Whereas San Andreas has some very, very funny elements to it. And every GTA after 4 as well, they like to keep humor as a big part of the storyline. And it was like, I mean, Vice City and the others in the series, GTA 3 and stuff, they were funny, but they were white funny. And San Andreas was black funny. And it's good to see that portrayed in a game as well, or in any kind of medium.
Yes, the introduction of a cultural representation. I think that's why it was important in that one.
And looking at that time frame as well, it's interesting you guys bring up this happened, you said 2003, 2004 ish. Because in 2007, I was just looking up right now, as you guys are talking about it, what first thing came to my mind was American Gangster, the movie with Denzel Washington, right?
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, to your point, it's like it takes the not the Sopranos approach, but it's like it looks at like the mob through the lens of a black man, right? It's like it tells that story. To your point, it's like people that we should not connect to necessarily, but those stories sometimes need to be told. And if they're going to be told, at least you might as well look at it through every angle, because that story does play out through an Asian angle, a black angle, Latino angle, like white angle, like Italian, blah blah. It's like it's all there, right? So yeah, no, it's interesting the timing of that when those games came out, and I wonder how much that influenced American Gangster, because that's Ridley Scott, right? It's a huge director attached to that movie.
Yeah.
And I'm curious like how much those played off each other.
Yeah. And it means that the like we were saying about Black Panther in the last episode, it transcends a Black audience. When you put a story like that in GTA, everyone's going to play it. It doesn't matter who you are. Everyone is going to play it. When you put Ridley Scott as the director of the film, everyone's going to watch it. It doesn't matter who you are. And it's important that these stories are able to transcend just race, because you can have the Black film for the Black audience, and that will do what it's supposed to do for that culture. But in order for diversity to grow, you need to have these stories that transcend just that audience.
That's true. Yep.
Agreed.
I don't know where to move on from that. I'm just gonna drop a couple of the games that I had on my list. But actually, no, just one more. Well, there's two. There's even older than what we just mentioned, GTA and San Andreas and all of that. There was the Michael Jordan in Windy City. You know, Michael Jordan was a massive, obviously sporting figure. It still is to this day. I think they actually, apart from being a video game with a Black lead, it's one of the most recognizable Black lead in history. You know, that's crossed over so many different eras in life. You know, business, movies, music. Really, Michael Jordan had anything to do with music? Not really.
He's been in a music video, but not
Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Well, no, so like maybe producing something, or you know, being behind something. No, not really. But yeah, so Michael Jordan in Windy City. Though. Yep.
There is one kind of cool story about Michael Jordan.
Everything about Michael Jordan is cool. Go on.
but when Spike Lee was trying to make it wasn't Do the Right Thing.
No, it's the one with Denzel and Ray Allen.
Yes. He got game. If I'm not mistaken, and someone could quite possibly correct me on this, but there's a big no, totally lie. When Spike Lee is looking for funding for Malcolm X. So Spike Lee goes to a studio, and I think it was Warner Brothers or something. It says, I want to make Malcolm X. And he's coming off of Do the Right Thing. I think like Crooklyn had come up, or She's Gotta Have It. Like he's it, right? He's like the big indie director. And he goes to the studio, he's like, I'm making this movie. And then he comes up with like a 4-hour cut of the movie. Have you ever seen it? It's a super long movie, right? Malcolm X. And the studio goes like, dude, we're not doing this. Like, you have to cut it down to an hour and a half. He's like, I can't tell a story in an hour and a half. And they went back and forth. And he's like, okay, I'm taking my movie with me. And he takes the movie, but he loses all his funding. And so he gets on the phone. He starts calling all his buddies. He's like calling. And he gets a bunch of people to start to contribute money. One of them being Michael Jackson. Right. But he also calls Michael Jordan, and he calls Magic Johnson. With the time, like they're printing money basically, right around the early 90s. And apparently the story goes that he starts getting funding for all of them. He's very close to be able to have the movie fully funded. And then he calls Michael, and of course they did the commercials together and all that stuff. And he's like, dude, so can you contribute to the movie? He's like, yeah, but it depends. How much did Magic give? And he's like, well, he kind of gave this to somebody. He's like, double it. So it's like, it just shows that like MJ was always in it to win, man. And he's like, no, I want to be your top contributor. Like, tell me what's the top, and I'll go over. And that's how Malcolm X gets made. If it's not for all those guys pulling together. So no, MJ has been a little bit involved in some of that stuff.
Okay.
Damn, Malcolm X is. I remember going to the cinema to see it, and it's the first time ever that I went to a movie in the cinema, and there was a break in the middle. I remember growing up, that shocked me. That like, all right, break time, because it's so freaking long.
It's a long. I just rewatched it last year. Man, that still holds up so well. I
need to get back into it. Yeah, it's
incredible.
Yeah. I forgot where I was. Michael Jordan. Yeah, so Windy City again. We were talking about Super Nintendo times. I think it only came out on Super Nintendo, not on Mega Drive. I can't remember. It's awesome. It's a platformer game. If you can find it somewhere on eBay, go get it, because it's legit. And I put on my dark. I put not Shaq Fu. If anyone knows about Shaq Fu, you know what I'm talking about. That's a 3.5. So
Representation, though.
I know. That's what I'm about to say. It's like it counts,
but
it counts, but it's on the border of being a bad idea. It's like a lot of like the stuff that Shaq did during that time.
Exists. It exists, and that's what matters, right? But and it got remastered, it got re-released, it got remade last year. I think, or 2 years ago.
Yeah,
last year.
No, last year, I think. Yeah, and it's important to note actually that there is a widely believed theory that you haven't truly made it as like Black people creating things in general until you're allowed to make crappy stuff, right? Like famous white directors, famous white filmmakers, famous white game makers, like it doesn't matter what the genre is, you're allowed to make crap and get away with it.
That's true.
And or actors or whatever, you're allowed to make crap and get away with it. There's a growing belief that we wouldn't have made it as Black creators until we can just make crap
and it's okay.
That's it. It gets made. I come to you with a crappy idea, a crappy script, a crappy game concept. It gets made and we lose money and we move on, and I just make something great next time, right?
Yeah, but that's how it usually works in the creative world, right? You gotta break eggs to make a nice omelet.
Yep. Well, Meteor Man walks so that Miles Morales can swing. It's like
something like that.
Yeah, that works.
No, but I got like this Michael Jordan reference, man. I've got to show this to my wife because she works for Jordan, and and I'm curious if they even know about this. Well, I'm sure someone does, but I'm like, I don't know. Never heard
don't
of this.
think I had heard of it. And it's funny that he has his own game because he famously never let himself be in computer games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And NBA computer games.
Look, I'm sure he's seen that. What was the other one? Magic versus Bird that came out in the 90s. It's like he must have seen that and went, there's a Magic and Bird game. Nah, I gotta have my own game. Gotta be in it. So pretty sure that was a reaction thing from Jordan.
Dude, I played the shit out of that game. The Magic and Bird game, I paid so much because it was the closest we had to something that looked legit. Because Double Dribble was good and all, but come on now. It's like this was next level. Like the 3-point shootout moment. Oh, yes. I used to love that. So good. You got the slam dunk. Don't get me started on that show. I could go on for an entire episode.
That's another episode.
Sorry, on that game. I've just dated myself so much.
A little bit. We know your age now.
This is the third episode of our Black History Month series. We will be back for a fourth episode to talk about Afrofuturism, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, rate, review, subscribe, follow us, go to Instagram, do all the things where Tom is waiting for you to show up, and he's going to say, like me, please, so that we can get more likes. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And thank you very much for Dave for showing up again and helping us out with this series. It's awesome to have like a third person here to talk about this and to just basically so we can like just come at it from so many different perspectives. So thank you for joining, dude.
You're welcome. And I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye.
Wakanda forever.